Welcome back into the Every Game on the Board college football podcast with our part number three. Our part number three, guys. That's what we're doing. We're going a little bit out of order here, Robbie. Plus, you're off of a bye week from last week. A lot of people asking where you were, but always good to have you, guys. If you're new to the Every Game on the Board podcast, we go over every single game on the board, numerical numbers next to the team name. We're using the Wager Talk Live odds screen. Those little numbers, we're going from 169, 170 USC Cal down to 191, 192 Troy, Texas State. So that section, those are the games we're talking. But Robbie, off of the bye week, of course, you were in Las Vegas visiting, seeing your son's band. That's really cool, man. Hopefully you enjoyed it. How was it? And welcome on in.
Good to be back, Drew. It was good. It's the first time they ever played in a indoor venue that was actual seating. They're playing in bigger venues now, between 2,500 and 4,000, but this was at the Palms Resort Hotel, and it was in the Pearl Theater, where they bring a lot of big acts in there. So it was good. It was good to see friends. It was good to have friends in Las Vegas finally get to see the band. They don't go through there all that often. But yeah, the one thing I didn't expect to see at a concert that my son would be performing at was the headline band covering a George Michael song, Drew. George Michael, Careless Whisper. So it was a good time for everybody, and saw a lot of Wager Talk people. Glad to be back.
Cool. We're glad to have you back, Robbie, and we're starting off with a decently good game here, at least in my opinion. USC Trojans and the Cal Golden Bears, 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock local time. Trojans minus 10 in the hook, 66.5 being the total, Robbie.
Yeah, I think this one, Drew, is all about mindset. I would love to be on the underdog here at Cal. If we just put it into situational perspective, I think you want to be on Cal, right? Cal's off a bye week, everything to play for. It's kind of an upstart team still under Justin Wilcox, but I don't think they've given up on the season. And you're playing a USC team that comes off a deflating loss to Utah, where they're now eliminated from the college football Final Four. So what does USC have left to play for here? Caleb Williams is going pro. What does he have left to risk anything for? All question marks. Now, they could very well come out and perform to the best of their capabilities, but I'm not so sure that USC is in that frame of mind right now at this point in the season, being deflated like that, where I know that Cal will give me 60 minutes of effort. Totals up there. Probably rightfully so. You know, Cal is playing at the 12th fastest tempo in the country right now, and USC gains the 5th most yards per play of any team in the country. All that speaks to offense. USC hasn't been great on defense all season long. I mean, all you have to do is go to that Utah game last week, and Utah hasn't really scored a lot of points this year, but they put up 34, including a game-winning drive when they had to with that offense. So, like I said, I'd like to be on Cal plus the points here, and I couldn't argue with anybody that wanted to take a shot at over 67 and a half.
Good start to the part number 3 here with Rob Veno at Rob Veno Sports. Washington State, Arizona State up next here. We're seeing minus 5.5. That is the Cougars on the road. 51 the total in Tempe, Arizona. What are we thinking here in the Conference of Champions?
Well, I think maybe Arizona State offensively is a little bit underrated here, Drew. Now, haven't been good all season long, but we know that we break this season down into thirds, maybe even quarters, if you like, and these college football teams kind of progress as the season goes on, especially when they're under a first-year head coach. In Arizona State's case, Kenny Dillingham inherited a mess. He's an offensive-minded coach. Remember, he was one of the youngest OCs when he was first hired a couple years back, I think by Memphis. He was only 28 years old at the time, so he's barely 30 now. But he's starting to get a little bit of a grasp of his offensive talent. Their offense looks a little bit better as weeks go on. They've suffered through a lot of injury on that side of the football. But again, when I look at the total here, and I guess they're being complimented by the money because the line has gone down. But I look at the total and see 51 in a game where Cam Ward for Washington State, I think Washington State's off a 400-yard passing performance last week. Cam Ward has somewhat hit a slump the week before, but came back strong last week. Arizona State looking good offensively as well. I kind of think that 51 in modern day college football for two teams like this. And again, I am kind of projecting Arizona State to be on an upswing offensively. If I'm wrong about that, it probably stays under. But I think that Arizona State can pull their weight on the offensive side in this one. I would look over 51. Don't have a lot of opinion on the side, but wouldn't be surprised at all based on recent results and the way Arizona State looks at this point in time. If they were to cover, I wouldn't be surprised. I just prefer to be on over 51 in that game.
All right, 3 of 4 in the Pac-12 to start off this section, guys. 4:30 Pacific kick here. Colorado at UCLA. We are seeing the Bruins minus 17.5-point favorite here, Robbie. This number jumped off as high to me, although I could see why, because Colorado, at times, like you talked about that USC defense, I don't know if they – well, I'll throw it over to you, man. 62 being the total. Colorado, Coach Prime at UCLA. Brian Kelly, what are we thinking here in the Rose Bowl?
Well, I used UCLA, and they cashed a ticket for me last week. They were laying 17, a big number against Stanford. And Stanford was off of that. Remember 29-0 down at halftime to Colorado, and Stanford comes back and wins right on that Friday night.
The wildest game of the season, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so Stanford comes in on a little bit of a high, but UCLA shuts them right down and performs well. I think the most underrated part of UCLA this season has to be the defensive side of the football, especially the defense against the run. And I question Colorado in this game. I'll backtrack real quick and say to you that when I first looked at it, 17 looked high to me as well. But when I think about the troubles and the struggles of that Colorado offensive line this season to protect Shedeur Sanders, I mean, it's been like anybody who can pass rush, go way, way back to Matt Rule and Nebraska in week 2. And he kind of blueprinted it for everybody. If they lost that game, Nebraska did, because they just weren't capable of throwing a forward pass. They weren't capable of hanging onto the football. But they had 9 sacks in that game. And they forced Shedeur Sanders to try and go through progressions, which after the first game, when we saw Colorado light it up against TCU, I don't think he knew he had to until that second game. Since then, anybody with a pass rush gets to the quarterback against Colorado. Anybody with a pass rush intercepts passes against Colorado. As good as Sanders may be at quarterback, when he's under pressure, he's an average quarterback, just like a lot of other guys around the nation. UCLA can apply that pressure, Drew, and UCLA can shut down the run. For those reasons, I have a hard time taking points with Colorado. They did make that huge comeback against USC where they were getting destroyed, maybe 34-6, but they come back and cover the number. But UCLA's defense isn't USC's defense. I don't know if you come back like that against this particular team. They win by 35 last week. Again, Chip Kelly, they're back at home now. Been on the road for a couple of games here. I think that UCLA might be the right side, tell you the truth. I just don't know that Colorado can cope with what they're going to bring as far as defensive pressure is concerned. And if Colorado can't run and they're forced to be throw only, we're going to see 5 or 6 sacks here and maybe a couple of picks by UCLA.
Sure, it's a big number for a reason, guys. We'll make it 4 straight here in the Conference of Champions, 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific. Degenerate special feel, although it's a competitively priced game here. When we're talking Oregon State, minus 3-point road favorites, 57 being the total. It's Oregon State at Arizona, so we get the Beavers up against the Wildcats. What are we thinking in Arizona?
Well, without question, the best of the Pac-12 games that we've talked about as far as competitiveness goes here. And it's because Jedd Fisch has brought Arizona along way faster than I think anybody anticipated. And I'll say this about Jedd Fisch. He's been around the block quite a bit. And whenever he's been in college as a head coach, I've disliked his teams because his playbook offensively is basically an NFL playbook, and it was always tough. Every team he had gone to, Drew, it seemed like they just couldn't get it. Playbook was too difficult. Here, I don't know if he, maybe brought it down a notch or two to make it a little easier for these kids. But Jayden de Laura, who's back this week, although he hasn't been announced as the starter yet, but Jayden de Laura at quarterback had been out for the last couple of weeks. He's back healthy at practice again. I'd expect to see him here. This offense has really, really picked up the playbook. They're scoring. They're explosive. Their quick strike capabilities exist. And I was reading a quote about 3 weeks ago from the head coach of Arizona, Jed Fish, who said, when I came here, my first goal was to straighten out this defense. And if you just go over their results incrementally, week 1 till now, that defense has gotten better and better and better against some good offenses. I'm not saying that they're holding people to 14 points a game, but they're better than they were. And it's good enough to get them competitive in all these games. I think they'll be in this one. The trouble they'll have, if they have trouble, is Oregon State's offensive line, which gives everybody trouble, right? They're so good at the point of attack. They run the football really well. It helps everything they do offensively. We'll see if Arizona can slow them down. Arizona's been to some difficult spots this year. They've been to Starkville. They stood up against an SEC team and forced them into overtime. So I think they're tested. At home, plus 3.5. Maybe worth a shot, but maybe even better yet, a little piece of that total, which is 56.5 in some spots. Oregon State, a lot of capability to score. Arizona State, a lot of capability to score. They can both play good defense, and this could still get over the way Pac-12 games go. Great game. I think if I had my choice, side or total, I'd probably lean on Arizona plus the points. I just like the way they're playing right now.
Big late night slate here, guys, with another one, 10:30 Eastern. New Mexico and Nevada. Another competitively priced game. We're seeing -1 or pick 'em. That's the Wolfpack. Nevada at home, 50 being the total. So we get the Lobos at the Wolfpack. What are we thinking in Reno?
Not much. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know if I've ever started an analysis with not much. But
well, that's fine, Robbie. We can move on.
It's just difficult, Drew. New Mexico comes up with a big effort last week, right when it looked like the nail was in the coffin for this team. They come up with 42 points last week. I think people were expecting them to be improved at the start of the year. They're kind of up and down. Nevada's a little bit on the upswing, and price is probably right. Can't make heads or tails out of the total. One thing I didn't do, and I would advise everybody to do, I should have before I came on the show, was check the weather in Reno at this time of year. It can be a factor at night. So you want to check into that. But it's a game that, unless I'm desperate to sit and watch it at night, Drew, 10:30 Eastern time, I probably won't be involved.
No, and I don't think you will be. We've talked a bunch of 10:30 starts, so you could pick another one if you need a late night Saturday night gamble. We got 7 o'clock Eastern, next one up, 4 o'clock local time. Washington, Stanford, as we'll head back to the last Pac-12 game we'll cover, -26.5. That's the Huskies as the road favorite, 61 the total in Palo Alto.
Yeah, good shot for Michael Penix Jr. in Washington to I won't say get right because they've been good all season long, but maybe to reestablish themselves as a 40-plus point scoring team against Stanford. UCLA got 42 against them last week. I talked about the difficulty that Stanford had with the UCLA defense. Washington's defense not to that capability. So Stanford should be able to score a little bit. Their quarterback, Ashton Daniels, not bad when given time to throw the football, and they've got some receiving weapons, and I like what Troy Taylor's doing from an offensive standpoint with that team. He'll be a good head coach down the road for them. They can probably score enough here, Drew, because Washington, when we go through their results and watch their games this year, while they score big, they're not opposed to letting the other team score, and sometimes because they score too quick, because they gain it in chunks and the defense gets thrown right back out on the field. So I can understand the movement from 59 all the way to 61 in this total. Problem, if you're going to play over, is 61 becomes a key number. And, you probably were better off at 59, but I still think you might have a little bit of room here. I could see something in the vicinity of 44-20, which would get you over. I think that's a likely possibility here. So if I had to, I would play this one over.
And this is a good time to shout out the sponsor of the podcast, guys, betonline.ag. You're looking to get down on the game. Check out betonline.ag. The game starts here. And the reason I say a good spot, because it is 61 at a lot of sports books, but it's just 60.5. So you get that extra half on a key number with a total at betonline. So go check them out there if you do like the over. We got Georgia and Florida. Let's do a little cocktail in here with the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, Robbie. The president of University of Georgia and University of Florida, those guys don't like us to use it, but this is the Every Game on the Board podcast and one of the best rivalry names out there. World's largest outdoor cocktail party, North Florida, Jacksonville, Florida. We got Georgia versus Florida. Bulldogs minus 14 in the hook as the quote-unquote road favorite, 48 being the total. I like the Gators here, Robbie. Both teams off a bye, catching 2 touchdowns. Georgia struggled with Auburn, man, and I think Florida's better than Auburn. I think that they could give them a run. Graham Mertz just threw for over 420 yards his last time out against South Carolina. I think he could carry some of that over. And Brock Bowers not playing for Georgia. I don't know. You think I'm crazy liking the dog, not the Bulldogs, but the underdog?
I don't think you're crazy. I think that throwing for that amount of yardage and when you're Graham Mertz against South Carolina is something that's doable. South Carolina's been a bad division. South Carolina, just of all the SEC teams, Drew, they have been banged up as much as anybody. I mean, the injury list for them since week 2 of the season, no wide receivers, no offensive line. I mean, I think they started their 8th different offensive line last week against Missouri. They played 8 games, had 8 different offensive lines in 8 games. It's crazy for them. So South Carolina, for Florida to have to come from behind against them and win 41-39. Spencer Rattler had a pretty good game against them as well. But to your point about Georgia struggling, they are. I mean, 37-20 against Vanderbilt. You're behind right away, 14-0 to Vanderbilt. It shouldn't happen that way when you're Georgia. The only thing that holds me back is that as much as, and if we go over every Georgia game, tell you the truth, the majority of their season has been a struggle, right? It's why a lot of people think they shouldn't be the number 1 team in the country because even though they haven't lost, they certainly don't look the best aesthetically. And without Brock Bowers, it makes a difference. But when they needed to step up, the one game when they played Kentucky and Kentucky came in undefeated and everybody started talking like maybe Georgia would lose. What happened? Kentucky got absolutely demolished and they haven't been the same since. So that exists in the back of my mind. I kind of think, man, maybe Georgia can just turn it on and turn it off. However, I think there's enough argument against that thought process here. We both, I think, are fans of Billy Napier. I think Billy Napier will have a game plan designed more than good enough to stay within the number. We're not asking Florida to win. We're asking them to hang within a big number in a rivalry, and I think it's really possible here. Florida, again, I've talked about a couple of teams so far in this segment that I believe are coming on and ascending and are better than they were at the start of the season. I think I would put Florida in that category. So, yeah, Drew, I think taking points here is the only way to go. A little bit scared of what Georgia did to Kentucky, seeing a repeat of that, but I don't know that it happens in this rivalry game. Florida's a little different than Kentucky, which is really, really one-dimensional. I think Florida's got enough of 2 dimensions here, and I think that, Graham Mertz and oh goodness, the kid who came from NC State and is now quarterback in Kentucky. I'm missing his name now, but both transfers and Mertz playing a little bit better. Devin Leary, there you go. Thank you, pal. Yeah, Devin Leary just not having a good season. Graham Mertz playing pretty good at this point in time. So I would be with you. I would take points with Florida in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Have you ever been?
You know what? I've never been. No. I've been to the stadium. I've been to Jaguars games. I love Jacksonville Beach, but no, I've never been. Have you been?
No, and I'm not big on going to live sporting events per se, but that's one that I think I would really, really enjoy, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I'd like to know how they came up with that name. Like, why is that one the world's largest outdoor cocktail party? I don't know. A lot to that. Any Georgia, Florida fans out there, let us know. Or if you're just kind of a SEC college football buff, let us know in the YouTube comments, or please rate and subscribe the podcast as well, or on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports, at Drew Martin Betts. We got Pittsburgh and Notre Dame up next. We're seeing the Irish near 3 touchdown home favorites, minus 20 in the hook, pretty much across the board here, Robbie. 45 being the total. Pitt Panthers, Notre Dame Fighting Irish. What are you liking in South Bend, Indiana?
Well, first thing that I really like is the quarterback switch that Pitt made. They seem to be a little bit better, a little more dynamic offensively now that Phil Jurkovec is out of there. That being said, Notre Dame showed us in that game against USC and that potent offense that their defense is that good. They've lost a couple along the way here, but it's still a really good team, a powerful team at the line of scrimmage. And I just don't know that Pitt line, matches up at that particular spot where a lot of games are won. Offensive line, defensive line in the trenches. Notre Dame, certainly the better team. If I want Pitt here, Drew, I have to believe that they can get themselves to the 20-point mark, and I just don't believe that they can. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe the 17-point mark. Not really sure that they can do it. They don't have the defensive capability this year, in my estimation, to be able to keep Notre Dame quiet. Notre Dame's had an extra week here, so they can. They certainly should be rested, healthy, and prepped for this one. I think the line movement's correct. I don't want to. I don't make a habit of laying 3 touchdowns, so I probably won't be involved. But if I were, that would be the side. Maybe even Notre Dame first half. Although if you're playing first half, you run the risk of Notre Dame maybe coming out a little rusty, a couple of series that don't go right until they get into the groove. And Pittsburgh does, like I say, the quarterback switch has helped a little bit. It's not a game I'm real interested in. I think in the end, Notre Dame does win, though. And the money early money was probably right. Closing line value doesn't always get you to the window. Sometimes it ends up in the trash, but those who got there early probably have the right side.
A candidate for the highest scoring game of the weekend here, Robbie. We get Memphis and North Texas, 3:00 Eastern here in Denton, Texas. 68 now being the total. -7 in the hook. That's the Memphis Tigers as the road favorite. Interesting handicap here. You liking anything with the Tigers and the mean green?
It is interesting, Drew, because you and I were part of a wager talk show with our good buddy Ralph Michaels the other day, where Ralph made the case that North Texas is the better team. And he did it using statistics that have been put up by both of these teams so far this year. Eric Morris, tribute to him as head coach of North Texas, steps in first year, brings that air raid offense. He's a Texas Tech disciple, comes from that long line of Mike Leach air raid guys. Good job at Incarnate Word. Then I think he went to Washington State with Cam Ward last year and got this head coaching job this year. North Texas has not missed a beat since the coaching switch here. And I don't know that they'll miss a beat in this game either as far as the offense is concerned, but their defense is horrendous. And Memphis has so much speed and so much ability and so much balance on the offensive side that it's hard to see either side stopping either. 69, it looks like such a huge number where total is concerned. But that being said, these two teams hit you so quick, and I don't know that either is good enough to stop. So this game would be over or nothing for me. I think it will be interesting to see if North Texas is able to hang in there with Memphis. I don't necessarily agree with the argument that was made by Ralph that North Texas is the better team, because when I went through Memphis's results this year, I'm kind of impressed with what Memphis has done. And again, at quarterback and the results of their games. So although I don't like to, they don't have the best defense in the world, I do think they can come up on the right side of this game. But I would prefer over, Drew. I think this game winds up somewhere in that 75-plus range.
Rob, we got Iowa State and Baylor up next. Cyclones -3-point road favorites, 47 the total in Waco.
Honestly, not sure why this game has flipped favorites and moved the way it did. I don't know where all the appreciation for Iowa State comes from. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying that when I examine this game, I don't really understand why you would rush to play the visiting Cyclones of Iowa State here at Baylor. Neither team is vintage. Iowa State has, after a lot of turmoil early in the year, right? They had that gambling scandal off season. They did not start the season well. They've come around a little bit. They're still not a good offensive team. And if I have to count on them to get me a drive at the end of the game, I don't know that I can. I'd much rather count on Baylor at home in that instance. Again, it's a little bit head scratching to me why there's so much movement in this game toward the Cyclones, but I would probably be on the other side, a little contrarian in this game, Drew, and think that Baylor at home with their offense good enough to win that game.
2 games left here, guys. Every game on the board, wherever you're downloading your podcasts at. Remember, every game on the board. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to the podcast. And 4-part series this week. And this is the last part that will be going live, but it's part number 3 on the podcast at Rob Veno Sports, at Drew Martin Bets on Twitter, on YouTube as well. Please comment below, like, and subscribe. Brought to you by Viva Tequila Seltzer, vivatequilaseltzer.com. Get it ordered to your house. 4 flavors, 0 sugar, no hangover, and presented by Bet Online, betonline.ag. The game starts here. 2 games to end it here, Rob, and we'll get a best bet as well. Houston, Kansas State. We are seeing K-State minus 17.5 as the home favorite. 59 the total in the Little Apple.
Yeah, I think, Kansas State has been a favorite of mine all season long, Drew, and not necessarily playing them as a side, but playing them over the total. Now, last week it didn't go my way. K-State rolls out 21 points in the first quarter, and I thought to myself, here we go again. They're just underestimated offensively. Their numbers are based on past perception of Kansas State and Bill Snyder, and they're just not that team anymore. They're not as good defensively as they once were, or as stout defensively. They're still good, but they used to be really, really strong at the point of attack. Not that way this year. You can move the ball on them. You can score on them. And this quarterback duo of Will Howard, who ever since he took over last year, this Kansas State, that's really when the offense took off. And then you add this freshman Avery Johnson to the mix and his running capabilities, and now they're go-to-headed quarterback. They're difficult to stop, Drew. And I don't think the Houston Cougars have a prayer of stopping this team. K-State rattled off 41 more last week. The reason why I didn't win over 59 is because TCU just didn't do a thing offensively in that game, which is very surprising for TCU. But I would think that Donovan Smith in Houston, a team, again, that goes pretty quickly, a team that has quick strike capability against a Kansas State defense that's vulnerable to allowing points, at least in the mid-20s. I could see this game getting over 59. Again, it started, I think, 61, got brought down. I didn't check it before the show, but I think it's in that 59 area. I'm just, right now, until further notice, I'm mostly on K-State totals over, as long as they're not out of range. And just to give the folks watching, or the folks that will listen to the podcast later on or watch it later on, I would say, where Kansas State is concerned, if the odds makers get as high as 65, then I would stop to think. But until that point in time, Drew, to me, they're a 40-plus point team against any defense like this one that Houston brings to the table. And Houston performed pretty well against Texas last week. They show us a little bit, being able in Big 12 play to move the football against Big 12 defenses. I think over 59 is the right way to go in this game.
Robbie, last one to end it for the live listeners here. 191, 192, Troy, Texas State. We got -6. That's the Trojans. Good Trojans team here as the road favorite. 53 being the total. The Bobcats can score. 53 being the total. That means Troy's defense is really good, which it is, Robbie. You liking anything Troy and Texas State?
I have to tell you, every time I get involved in a Troy game, I wind up walking away saying I can't stand Troy from an offensive standpoint. I mean, they just – Gunnar Watson, the quarterback, they brag about him during every broadcast, and he misses about 6 throws in every game. And I'm just like, what's so great about this guy? But they can run the football. They run it well. And they can play defense, as you mentioned. Again, it's offensive line, defensive line. And where Sunbelt is concerned, they're one of the best in that league, if not the best. I think you could argue they're probably that they could be the best offensive line and defensive line, that combo in Sunbelt play. And that's how they get through. They really get through by mucking up the game and the other team missing opportunities. I would love to take my shot with Texas State here. You've got 2 SEC quarterbacks. We mentioned it over and over again that this team has really taken off with the play of the quarterbacks here. I just don't know that they can hold up defensively, Drew, and that's my problem in this game. I don't know that Texas State is physical enough. If you're going to have – if Troy shortens the game, Texas State's going to try and get this thing up to maybe 12, 13 possessions each, while Troy's going to try and narrow it to 9 possessions or less. Either way, I don't know that Texas State is good enough consistently to hang on for that many drives, where Troy State probably is. Troy probably can get a pick. They probably could force a fumble. Where on the Texas State side, you're not that sure. So the number being this small, I can't take the home team plus these points, even though I'd like to. I like what I see out of Texas State this year. Troy just seems to come up with wins. If Texas State were to win this game, I wouldn't be at all surprised. But just from a handicap of the game, you have to believe that the defensive edge on Troy's side weighs pretty heavy here. The one thing, and again, I like to pretend to be a coach when we do shows like this. I'm not on the sidelines. I don't coach. But if I'm Texas State, I just shove 8 guys to the line and force Troy to throw the football and see if Watson can beat me. I think if they do that, they've got a little bit of a chance.
Hey, puncher's chance, maybe catching the 6.5. He's Rob Veno. This is the Every Game on the Board podcast. I am Drew Martin. Guys, we got final thoughts, best bet from Robbie Veno himself. Rob, take it away. Any final thoughts, best bet before we shut it down?
Yeah, final thoughts. First of all, glad to be back on the show with you, Drew. Glad to see the sponsorship Bet Online. Glad to have all the viewers back and, viewing us now. And those that will listen to the podcast later, it does seem to be a popular show for the folks watching, trying to get some college football advice. So again, we're trying to give you the best that we know, try to point you in the right direction. Hopefully we're cashing some tickets for you. For best bet this week on this show, I'm going to go back to what I talked about a couple of seconds ago with Kansas State. I just love their offense, Drew, and I do think when they get a defense that's vulnerable, which Houston's is, and a team that's going to play with pace and create extra possessions like Houston will, then I want to play Kansas State totals over. This one sits in the 59 range. To me, it can get over 60. I think unlike TCU's 3-point performance last week, Houston probably finds their way to the 20-point mark. And if they do, it goes over. If they exceed it, it goes way over. So I'm going to take Kansas State, Houston over 59 or whatever the official number needs to be for the show. But that's where I'm at.
It's actually, it's 59 at Bet Online, interestingly enough. Thanks for the sponsorship. Check them out, betonline.ag. It is 59.5 at most other shops, but we can give you the low water mark here at the sponsor of the show, 59, guys. Kansas State and Houston over 59. Best bet for Rob Veno. Anything else, buddy?
Other than that, Drew, like I said, this college football season, boy, it flies, right? I mean, we're sitting here, we're in like week 9. I think the ratings came out finally. They do after 8 weeks. So we're getting to that stage now. We're going to be looking at bowl matchups and, the college football Final Four pretty soon. But love the season, love doing the show. Hope everybody has a successful weekend, beginning with tonight.
Likewise, Rob. Hey, great stuff as always. He'll be back next week, guys. I'm Drew Martin. He's Rob Veno. That does it for Week 9, Every Game on the Board. If you're listening podcast, there will be one more episode with Sammy P acting as our closer this weekend. So, guys, that's it. Thanks for tuning in. Every Game on the Board, wherever you're downloading your podcast at, YouTube as well, and Twitter. Thanks for tuning in. Cash those tickets. We'll be back next week. Have a fun, safe